Sure thing. Thank you so much for the intro, G. So, hi everyone. I'm Lizette Spangenberg. I am a researcher at Expertly Labs. So, just to give you an idea, my doctorate was in human-centered design and looking at how that can be used to improve radiology environments. So, my background is in research and healthcare, and I've also been a UX designer for many years before I very recently moved over to the pure research side of things. So that's what I'm passionate about, is research and thinking about things and seeing how we can actually get to the bottom of problems. So this talk that I'm giving today, I just want to unpack the title a little bit to make sure that we're all on the same page about what we're talking about. So we're talking about when artificial intelligence can't see you, designing against algorithmic cruelty. Now, that's quite a mouthful. So artificial intelligence, hopefully you've heard of this before. Artificial intelligence is those things that we are hearing and seeing everywhere. It is our ChatGPTs, it's Gemini, it is image generation software, it is recommendation engines, it is a million other things that we don't even necessarily realize is artificial intelligence. Though, I want to unpack the second part a little bit, so algorithms. Now, we as designers, BAs, product owners, whoever you might be in the audience, we don't necessarily deal with algorithms on a daily basis. So let's just make sure we're all on the same page and we talk about what is an algorithm actually. So by definition, an algorithm is a finite set of step-by-step instructions designed to solve a specific problem or complete a task. So in simple terms, you can think of this as, if this happens, then this should happen. I'm sure you've all heard of for loops, of if loops, those kinds of things. It's a very straightforward algorithm, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with artificial intelligence or machine learning. Now, some of you might have heard the term machine learning. Machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence. So all machine learning is artificial intelligence, but not necessarily all artificial intelligence is machine learning. So I'm not going to get too deep into that. Just know that if you hear the term machine learning, it has something to do with AI, but it is a specific section of it that means that it is something that is programmed to learn. So it's a mathematical, logic and computational procedure that allows an artificial intelligence system to identify patterns in data, learn from examples, and make predictions without being explicitly programmed. Now, this relates very much to what I was saying about it can learn things, it can interpret things, it can extrapolate patterns, etc. This does not mean that it has human intelligence. It does not mean that it's going to take your job because it can outthink you. It just means that it's very good at finding patterns and recognizing how things work. Okay, so that's the theory part of our lesson done, I promise. No more long explanations. I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page when we're talking. So when I'm talking about algorithms in this talk specifically, I'm going to be talking about machine learning algorithms. So not just plain, simple, straightforward mathematical algorithms or programming algorithms, but machine learning algorithms that actually start to use data in new and interesting ways. So first up, I want to use an example that I think most of us are familiar with, Spotify Wrapped. I don't know about you, but every year I'm always very excited to see what my Spotify Wrapped for the year actually shows. It gives you an overview of the things that you've listened to this year in Spotify, and it gives you an idea of how much time you've spent listening to which artists, what have been your most popular songs, etc., etc. And it's always quite interesting and exciting to see what those are. So a few years ago, one of the trends that was popping up everywhere is a lot of people were being told that they had pink Pilates princess phases during their listening history. And a lot of people went like, oh, this is fun, this is exciting. And the artists that were generally associated with this was Lady Gaga, Lana Del Rey, Chappell Roan, Taylor Swift, of course. And you'll see at the top there, this person says, every year Spotify finds new and interesting creative ways to call me gay. So that's an interesting take. And the strange thing is, this is not by any means the only person who interpreted it this way. So you'll see it says, Pink Pilates Princess Catwalk, just call me gay, please. The Pink Pilates Princess in question, I just want to be addressed as a Pink Pilates Princess from now on. And then the last one gets a bit jarring, and it says, I think Spotify Wrapped just called me a slur. So I'm sure it was a comment made in jest, but you can easily see how this can make someone sit back and go, wait, what? Why is Spotify calling me this? A lot of articles jumped on this, and they even websites went so far to say that if Spotify Wrapped called you a Pink Pilates Princess, you're probably gay. Now, imagine you're someone sitting there looking through your Spotify Wrapped. Maybe you're watching it with friends, maybe you're watching it alone, and suddenly this thing comes up and it's being associated with being gay. Maybe you're closeted, maybe you haven't explored that part of yourself yet. So this can be something that's a little bit jarring and uncomfortable. So people started making comments about it to say, but, did he, get called a Pink Pilates Princess on Spotify Wrapped, implying that this person might be gay and they might not realize it or might not be out about it. Or someone said, I just saw one of my straight friends get called a Pink Pilates Princess on their Spotify Wrapped, meaning they don't think they're really gay, really straight. Now, this can very easily cause a lot of discomfort and a lot of uncomfortable feelings for something that is actually quite personal. So it's very quick to go from something very lighthearted and playful to something that's actually quite jarring and uncomfortable and uncertain of how to actually deal with this scenario. So moving on to our next example, which is something that I personally experienced. Many years ago, I was in a Facebook official relationship. And when we reached the 3-year mark of being in this Facebook official relationship, I started getting ads for engagement rings because, 3 years is apparently when Facebook thinks you should be getting married. A while after that, when we broke up and I was single again, these are screenshots of the targeted ads that I received for Old Cat Lady and Cat Lady Land. I screenshotted them because I was so shocked and surprised. And don't get me wrong, I am by all means a cat lady. I love cats, obsessed with cats. But that's still not something you want to see when you're recently out of a breakup. It was very jarring and very uncomfortable, and it made me feel that Facebook was taking advantage of this. Although I'm sure it wasn't intended maliciously. You can't just say, women over a certain age that are single, show them this ad. You need to think of the repercussions of that. Another lighthearted and silly example, this poor lady, go and look her up and look this video up on TikTok if you have a chance. It's quite hilarious. She talks about the fact that she had a virtual appointment with her doctor to determine if she had hemorrhoids or not. And the doctor told her, just take some photos and email it to me. She went, you want me to do what now? The doctor said, don't worry. No one's even going to know it's you. We see this kind of thing all the time. She's like, okay then. So she took the photos, she sent it to the doctor, finished her consult. And a few weeks later, Apple Photos decided to remind her, hey, remember on this day, you took the following photos. So she suddenly got a bunch of photos of her hemorrhoids, uncropped and live photos that were just suddenly playing on her phone to remind her of this day that she took all these photos. So again, the algorithm meant well, because I'm sure you've seen this on your phones. You get reminders of, oh, you went to this birthday party, or oh, you went to the park on this day. Those can be fun. Seeing photos of your hemorrhoids may be a little bit less fun. Which brings us to our last example for now. So in 2014, a man called Eric Meyer received this notification on his Facebook feed. Now, in 2014, Facebook didn't have the ability to allow you lots of different interactions. You could only like photos. There was no way to celebrate or to show care or to differentiate what kind of interaction you were giving. You could only thumbs up and like. So for this photo, he saw this and he burst into tears because Facebook decided, oh, we're going to show you your urine review. And he had seen friends of his sharing their urine review, their most liked photo. For some of them, it was a birthday party. For some of them, it was a wedding. For some of them, it was a graduation. For him, his most liked photo that year was of his daughter who had passed away. And this was incredibly jarring to open up his Facebook and see this post with all the little celebration banners, the little people dancing, and the photo of his daughter who had passed away. And he coined the term inadvertent algorithmic cruelty. The idea that this algorithm had done exactly what it was supposed to do. It took his most liked photo and it surfaced it to him. But no one had ever stopped to think that maybe your most liked photo isn't a memory you want to relive. People then started sharing stories about the fact that their most liked photo had been of their house burning down, and similar things where it was a tragedy. 2 years later, in 2016, Facebook did introduce the ability to differentiate between different kinds of interactions. Don't know if it was in response to this or if they even saw this, but they eventually realized that people were using likes not just to show, yay, we actually like this, but to show support, to show they cared, to show they're shocked or surprised. And they allowed the ability to differentiate between this. So what do all of these examples actually have in common? It's the fact that the algorithm was functioning exactly as intended for every single one of these. It never went wrong. It never did something it wasn't supposed to. It worked exactly as it was supposed to. But yet at the same time, each of these introduced the idea of inadvertent algorithmic cruelty, where it caused discomfort. It caused something that wasn't a happy feeling, and it didn't consider the human side. So harm doesn't only come from biased data. It can enter through what we optimize for and through the way that we present for an imperfect system to users. So at this point, you might be thinking, but Liz, we're designers and we're researchers and we're BAs and we're product owners. We don't write the code. We don't write the algorithms. What can we actually do about this? Which is fair. So let's have a little bit of a look at how software is actually structured. So if we look at our software stack, right at the bottom, we have our data layer. Then on top of that, we have a logic layer, and then we have an interface layer. So UX design generally plays between the logic layer and the interface layer. And that's sort of where our home is. Like I say, we don't write the code. We're not data scientists. But those are also the three different places where harm can enter. And we need to consider that, and we need to think about how we can mitigate that harm. So on the data layer, we need to think about who is represented, who is missing, and what biases are embedded in the data. In the logic layer, we need to think about what has the system been told to optimize for. It's very easy to optimize for one thing and completely forget the human side of things. Then lastly, on the interface layer, we need to think about how confidently do we present something that could potentially be wrong. And I'll show you an example in a bit where that can potentially happen. And we can think a bit about how we mitigate that. So the UX gap. In many AI projects, the data scientists build the model, engineers build the product, and then the end users validate the outputs. So UX often, if you're in a not so great situation, you might only get involved in the interface layer. Ideally, you want to be involved in the logic layer already, but that doesn't always happen. And that harm originates upstream. So we need to think about how we can introduce ourselves in different layers to actually help mitigate the harm that can potentially be caused. So what can UX actually do? So first of all, we need to think about who does this work the worst for? So who is missing, who's underrepresented, who's vulnerable, who's disproportionately affected when the system gets something wrong? You need to actually sit and think about all these uncomfortable questions that often people don't want to think about. They don't want the answers to this because it might mean that there's a flaw in the product that needs to be reconsidered. You also need to think about what happens when the system is wrong. So not if it is wrong, but what are the consequences if it is wrong? And how can the user recover? What mechanisms can you give them to actually solve and get out of the situation where they are, where it's presenting information to them that might not be correct? And then lastly, what are we optimizing for and at whose expense? So what behavior is the system incentivized to produce and who bears the cost for that optimization? Like I said, it's very easy to optimize something and to forget the humans in this. Now, a way to actually think about this, some of you might be familiar with the series Black Mirror. It's on Netflix. It's been running since, I want to say 2017, 2018. They have a couple of different seasons, and it generally goes, the themes are generally around technology and people and how things go wrong. So it's very dystopian and very much uses technology in some horrific ways and generally ends very badly. But the idea is this Black Mirror test. It's a speculative design method where teams intentionally brainstorm the most dystopian, abusive, or harmful ways that your product could be used in order to identify and prevent ethical, social, or safety issues. So basically, if this behavior that your app or your website or your product wants to happen, if it becomes more frequent, more automated, or more extreme, would it still feel humane? So try and think of the worst case scenarios, think of how it can be abused, and then try and solve for that and design against that. So next I want to move on to a case study. I'm sure some of you have seen this kind of interaction before. I'm not focusing on any specific app here, but the idea of a face scan. So this is something that some insurance companies use, some healthcare companies use. And the idea is you take your regular cell phone, you scan your face for 30 seconds, and it gives you a whole bunch of metrics related to your health. Now, the different kinds of, so the technology that it uses, I cannot pronounce that word, but it is, shorthand is RPPG. It uses light frequency to interpret certain data. And things that it can verifiably measure is something like your pulse rate. So it looks at your face and it actually can detect the tiny twitches that your heart rate is creating. And like I said, it uses light wave technology from your camera to measure that. Your heart rate variability and your breathing rate. So your nostril flares, it can measure how many breaths you're taking per minute. Then there's also a bunch of inferred or derived metrics that it can also display to you, such as your blood pressure, your mental stress index, your waist to height ratio, mental well-being score, physiological score, and it generally gives you a general wellness score. Now, this is all good and well. I have my own concerns with the accuracy of some of these products. I used one of them once. By looking at my face, it told me what my waist circumference was. It was off by about 20 centimeters. It said I was a lot larger than I actually am. For those of you who measure or are used to measuring your bodies, you'll know that 20 centimeters around your waist is quite a big difference. So I am apparently a lot skinnier than my face looks. So we tested one of these apps at a company that I worked at, and my colleague, who was our QA tester, was testing it, and she couldn't get any of these metrics. And she ran into an issue that we hadn't even considered for this app or for this kind of thing. And the simple answer was she's Black. So it couldn't see her face. It couldn't give her metrics because it couldn't recognize her. And it was quite jarring to realize this. So you'll see on the left-hand side, it said measurement cancelled. There was an error analyzing your results. Please try again. And on the right-hand side, the scan is supposed to take 30 seconds. You'll see there it's on 1 minute and 13 seconds. It simply cannot detect her face. And this was very jarring and very upsetting for her because this technology, which had come from Canada, it simply didn't recognize her and it didn't recognize her face. And we realized that it actually couldn't pick up any of our co-workers who didn't have white or light skin. And it was very frustrating. So we had to explore other options. So this is not a new phenomenon and it's not unique to this product, unfortunately. So I'm going to show you a very short clip of another doctor who has experimented with a few different kinds of face scan technologies and the issues that she ran into.
The system I was using worked well on my lighter skinned friend's face, but when it came to detecting my face, it didn't do so well until I put on a white mask.
Now that's quite jarring. You wouldn't want to think that that can actually happen. And this was something that had nothing to do with the face scan app. It was just face recognition technology. But this happens in many different places. And the reason for it, the best reason that we could determine is because the technology that we were using originated in Canada, the data set that they had trained it on did not include enough people of color. It didn't include enough Black faces and different skin tones. So nowadays, there are quite a few of these face scan apps. This one, Shen AI, for instance, they advertise very widely the fact that they can cater for different kinds of skin colors and skin types, which is fantastic because everyone should have the chance to actually be considered. Now, something that we spoke about earlier, the accuracy of these metrics and the fact that, often we only have the opportunity to get involved at the interface layer. These are just some of the warnings that I've managed to collect for some of these face scan apps where they tell you, oh, it's for investigational use only, metrics might not be accurate. It's not a medical device because it's a cell phone. It's not FDA approved, etc. And this is their way of mitigating harm to say, oh, the metrics might be completely wrong, but right at the bottom of the page, we kind of told you they might be completely wrong, so we're safe. And the question becomes, is this good enough? Is it good enough to have a biased AI and biased algorithms that could be completely wrong and you're showing people data that affects their health and you're trying to mitigate this with a quick little disclaimer? I would say that it isn't. It's not good enough. If your product has the potential to cause harm, you have a responsibility to actually not put that product out there, which is a whole talk I can give on its own, but I won't because I know I'm over time. So next, we're going to move on to accuracy versus equity. So the things that algorithms care about and that algorithms want to optimize for, because remember, algorithms don't have wants and needs of their own. They only have what they're programmed to do. So they want average performance. They want to optimize that performance. They want statistical accuracy and they want dataset patterns. They love pattern matching. So if you ever have large quantities of data, especially in UX research, you chat algorithms are incredibly good at finding patterns. For instance, between participant interviews, very good at finding those patterns that you yourself might not necessarily find. But on the other hand, what people need is you want fairness, you want context, and you want representation. So bear in mind that these two are not necessarily aligned. And we as people need to stop and think how we can actually bring those things into what algorithms are looking for. So designers have a responsibility. So we need to anticipate harm. We need to ask who could be excluded, who could be misclassified, manipulated, surveyed, humiliated, or denied an opportunity even, including people absent from the room that are being spoken about. We need to challenge the objective. So a system can optimize its metric while harming people. Designers should question what is being optimized, what is defined as success, and what the metric ignores. We also need to design for human dignity. People should not be scores or categories without meaningful context, especially in healthcare, employment, education, policing, credit, and public services. We need to make uncertainty visible. So AI outputs should not appear more authoritative than they are. The interfaces should communicate how confident they are in the results that they are actually providing. They should provide what their limitations are, what the data gaps are, and whether human review is actually available. And then lastly, we need to preserve agency and recourse. So people need to understandable ways to decline, correct data, contest decisions, appeal outcomes, and actually be able to reach and speak to a human. This is an incredibly important thing that people often forget and leave out. Is you need the ability to just talk to a human being that can help you. I'm sure that you found yourself in a situation where you're locked into a loop talking to an AI, and it's super frustrating. So lastly, I'd like to show you a quick video. This was shown during the Super Bowl, I believe it was earlier this year. And this goes from AI not being able to see you to perhaps AI seeing you a little bit too much.
This is Milo. Pets are family. But every year, 10 million go missing. And the way we look for them hasn't changed in years. Until now. One post of a dog's photo in the Ring app starts outdoor cameras looking for a match. Search Party from Ring uses AI to help families find lost dogs. Since launch, more than a dog a day has been reunited with their family. Be a hero in your neighborhood with Search Party. Available to everyone for free right now. Join the neighborhood at ring.com.
So what a lovely thought. You can find your pet. We all love our pets. I'm sure you can also start thinking about the fact of exactly how badly this can go wrong. People immediately started creating a lot of backlash to do with surveillance, mass surveillance, the possibility of being watched all the time, the possibility of tracking dissidents, political dissidents. And then the most jarring comment that I found was, hey, Ring, help me find my dog that my estranged ex, who has been hiding from me out of fear, walks every day. A very heartwarming ad and idea can go very dystopian and very scary very, very quickly. And it's our responsibility as designers to help mitigate that. So thank you very much. That is me. Any questions?
Lizette, thank you so much for that great and insightful talk. Lots of positive emotions and emojis. Just checking the questions. Okay, we've got one here from, let me just check. Okay. if an AI system causes harm despite working exactly as designed, where does the responsibility ultimately lie? For example, data, the algorithm, designers, organization, etc.
I think it's very hard because obviously anything that gets published and released has multiple failure points from the person who came up with the idea through to the CEO of the company. But I would like to think that ultimately the responsibility lies with the company and therefore the CEO of that company because they are the representation of that. So it's easy to say, oh, but the designers missed this. Oh, but the devs missed this. Oh, but, someone missed this. But the person who's ultimately responsible for it, the person who is ultimately I'd say the CEO is ultimately responsible for it, and they rely on their team to make informed and intelligent decisions. So it's not enough to say, but everyone else missed it too. It lies with each person. But ultimately it lies with the person who represents the company. So it's a hard one because, it doesn't lie with a single person. But if it gets to the point like that ad where the CEO is the person who was walking his dog there, and he's very proudly advertising this thing and saying how amazing it is, how have you not thought about the fact that this thing can so easily be used for such bad things? It was withdrawn almost immediately after the Super Bowl because they received such incredible backlash from it, because people were terrified about the potential misuse of it, which somehow the company hadn't thought about. Or maybe they did think about it and they thought that they could slip it past people. I don't know.
Wow. Thank you. We've got a few questions in the comments. The first one this one from Shaima. Is there any example that you've come into contact with that has implemented guardrails for their AI products? Wow, that's done it well.
Sure. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any right now, but I do know there are quite a few companies that do take AI ethics in AI very seriously. Sorry, off the top of my head, I can't think of any right now, but I do think it is something that is being spoken about more and more. And so at any conference, you'll usually see a talk about ethics in AI. And although it might seem like a topic that gets over spoken about, I think there's still way too many unethical AI practices out there that it's necessary to keep talking about it. So, and hopefully to actually establish, specific patterns that people need to adhere to. So there are still many companies and think tanks and so on who are trying to establish guardrails in general that people should be using. And I think even South Africa, we as a government, as a country, we launched a document a while ago for the responsible use of AI. Now, the irony being the document was written by AI and it was very quickly caught out and lambasted because there were sources quoted that don't exist. So someone wrote the document for how to use AI responsibly with AI and didn't double check it. That's a whole other story on its own. But so it is something that people are thinking about, and people at a government level are trying to regulate and trying to think about how do we actually do this responsibly. So in short, no, I can't think of any right now, but there are some companies who are getting it right. Far more, though, that are not getting it right and are not considering it thoroughly yet.
Okay, thank you. I hope that helps Shaima. We've got another question from Bjorn. Can we confirm that skewed performance, statistical inaccuracy, and biased dataset patterns have anything, if not everything, to do with how AI is used to impact users in good, negative, and also fatal ways. Where is the human guardrail?
Yeah. So
And
I'd say yes, definitely. There's definitely skewed data sets that have influenced people in terrible ways. There's a study that came out in 2017, I believe, where they found in America that they were using an AI model to predict the healthcare costs, what healthcare costs should be spent on different kinds of people. And what this study found is that disproportionately Black people were not given the same spend as white people because historically the Black people had received less care. So it was basing future behavior on past behavior, and they had not anticipated how skewed the data would actually be. So inaccurate data, incomplete data. There's also examples of sentencing models where they used AI sentencing models for court cases, where they looked at how they would give the AI the court case and tell them this is the situation, what do you recommend the sentencing should be? And it time and time again, it recommended that Black people should serve longer sentences for the exact same crimes. And again, it was because it was based on historical data, which had been biased. So it's so important to make sure that you get good data and data that is not biased and is not not biased and not disproportionately affecting people, because that is what you're training it on and that's what it's going to give you. So it's that saying of rubbish in, rubbish out. So you need to be very careful about what you train machine learning models on, because that's what you're going to get back.
thank you.
So the human guardrail in that is we as humans need to make sure that the data sets that we feed it are actually complete and that they are fair. So, I mean, even as designers, we need to ask those questions about where is this data coming from? Who is it learning from? What new data is it getting in? How did we decide this? So even though we're not writing the algorithms, we need to think of the people and we need to ask those difficult questions.